In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna tells us, outstanding among the wise is he whose devotion is constant and one-pointed. I am above all things dear to that sage, and he of all beings is dearest to me. The sage who has established himself firmly in me as the highest goal, him I look upon as indeed my own self. After many incarnations, the sage realizes me in my true nature, a person so illumined that he sees me a person so illumined that he sees me as all-pervading is rare and hard to find. Yogananda ji would often quote those words. He would say, "Yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, that man who saith, all is Vasudev." Wherever that wise man looks, he sees God, only God. And the goal of all religion is that perfect union with God. We're created for that purpose, nor can we ever be fully satisfied until we fulfill that ultimate destiny. St. Augustine wrote, "Father, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." And yet, from the start of our lives, energy is drawn outward from us into the world. We have to eat. We have to learn to use our bodies, learn to talk. It seems the path to God is like an obstacle course, or the deck is stacked against us. As Adi Shankaracharya put it, the child is busy with playthings. The youth is busy with sex and romance. The old are busy with sickness and worries. No one is busy with God. And yet the saint Sukdeva said that all time is wasted that is not spent seeking God. This doesn't mean that we need to be meditating all the time. It means that whatever we do in that activity, seek God. Yogananda ji taught us to feel the joy of God in all the things that we have to do anyways. And that joy also needs to be understood in context. Our modern society equates joy with what we feel in things. And for a time we can feel joy in things. We get a new phone and it's just a lot of fun to explore what it can do. And that kind of joy comes when we've realized our expectations have been fulfilled. Swamiji said that this kind of joy is a little bit like pinching your hand harder and harder. And when you finally let go, you say, "Oh, that feels so good." a little desire is like a little pinch. And then maybe you pinch harder and harder. If you say, I must have that thing, or I won't be happy ever again. And you get it, and you feel relief, because that particular desire has been satisfied for the moment. But of course, there's another kind of joy, not dependent on anything outside of ourselves, that unchanging joy of the divine. One disciple of Yoganandaji had a ecstatic experience once and was feeling very blissful. And the guru gave her instructions after that to go to downtown Los Angeles to a department store to make some purchases for him. And she, out of obedience, went, but she was concerned that she would lose this feeling of bliss that she had at that time. And Yoganandaji didn't need those things that he asked her for. He was testing her to see, could she hold on to that inner peace? Could she hold on to that bliss in the marketplace? And she found that she could, that she felt blissful riding up the escalator, being jostled by a crowd of people. And this is also the lesson for each of us, to keep the consciousness of God in all the things that we need to do. And once we have that, then nothing can shake us. Some 60 years ago, Swami Kriyananda lived in India for 4 years. He was a young man in his 30s, and his job was to travel and lecture. And in meditation, he asked the question, what's the best attitude that I can have when I'm lecturing? And this inspiration came to him, to feel everyone I lecture to is my guru, to speak to divine consciousness in each person, speak to that person's highest self. And instead of just conveying information, I should offer to my guru what I have to say. I dedicate what I have to say on the altar of his love. By my offering to the Guru, he gives me his power and he talks through me. This is how we want to manifest God in our daily lives, to be so attuned with him that he acts, he talks through us. And whatever we do, we can do with a sense of making a humble offering to our higher selves, to the infinite, to God, to the Guru, whatever name we want to use. And let's resolve to live more in that consciousness, more in God, to include him in every activity, in every decision, to offer the fruits of our actions to him. And in doing this more and more, then we can also say, as the sage in the Gita said, that God is the doer. God is all pervading. All is Vasudev. Thank you.
I'd like to start this morning by reading from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda, a short excerpt. He's quoting the Bible from Matthew when Jesus says to his disciples, I say unto you, except that your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. What Jesus was referring to here was the self-righteousness of the priests. Don't seek perfection, he was saying, in the image you project towards others. Don't be satisfied with the goodness born merely of ego definitions. The highest virtue is to transcend the very thought of personal virtue in the realization of God alone as the doer. Before this realization, even the thought, I am kind, I am truthful, is self-limiting. I read that passage and I was thinking how easy it is for us to think, oh, I'm on the spiritual path. I meditate. I'm much more spiritual than the rest of my family. And I'm much more spiritual than all of my friends. And I was just thinking how easy it is to begin to think that we really have made it far along the spiritual path when we compare ourselves with others around us. And, you know, the analogy is if a very tall person stands in the middle of a bunch of children or a bunch of very short people, he will think, wow, look how tall I am. And so let's not compare our spiritual progress with those around us. Let's instead compare ourselves with saints. I mean, look at Yogananda ji. When he wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, he wrote like he was just this humble devotee, moving around India, looking for saints, trying to get advice, and trying to have them help him on the spiritual path. So if he was so humble and self-forgetting, think of us. We need to, if we're going to compare ourselves with anybody, compare ourselves with the great ones and with the saints to whom we're trying to emulate. And then we can get a clearer picture of how far we are along the spiritual path. You know, when we begin the spiritual path, it's sort of like climbing up a steep mountain. And when we're down below at the bottom of the mountain, we have a certain perspective, we can see certain things. But as we climb the mountain, our perspective becomes greater and we can see much further. And we can see perhaps a greater perspective of not only the progress we've made in this lifetime, but the cumulative progress of many lifetimes. Somebody asked Sister Gyanamata one time, which was Yogananda's foremost woman disciple who achieved enlightenment. They asked her, if you could do this life over again, what would you do differently? And she said, I probably would do more or less the same things, but I would do it much better, and I would do more of it, more and better. So that's an enlightened saint who said that, so let's us also do more and better. Some of the stages that we might find ourselves on the spiritual path once we're starting that steep climb is that we know about the path. Maybe we've read the Autobiography of a Yogi, maybe we've come to meditation classes, maybe, you know, we've grown up in this incredible culture of teachings, and we know what we need to do to achieve the goal of self-realization. And we can talk about it to others. Yeah, we need to overcome the ego, we need to expand our consciousness, we need to get over our reactions. These are all the things we must do to achieve realization. And we can talk about it a lot and make a lot of noise about it. But if we're not actually doing the practices, if we're not actually walking the path, we won't get very far. There was a devotee at Ananda who said to Swami Kriyananda one time, I've been on the path 5 years and I don't feel any closer to the goal than 5 years ago. And you know, people can live next door to a very fine restaurant and they can be hungry, but if they don't go to the restaurant, how will their hunger ever be fulfilled? And another example is, you know, somebody can describe the beauty of a rose perfectly, and yet he doesn't know how to grow a rose. it doesn't help him very much. So we don't want to be like the scribes and Pharisees. We don't want to be like the priests that just know the scriptures. We can repeat it by rote. We can do the rituals perfectly, but there's no communion in our lives. There's no heartfelt connection with God, with the Guru. So let's not be like the scribes and Pharisees and just talk about it and have no action. And then there's another stage on the spiritual path. Yogananda had a prayer that said, Divine Mother, you're my mother. Naughty or good, I am yours. And so there's the naughty or good phase. Like, we understand that this path is steep. We understand that it's easy to fall off. And maybe we do fall off, but we're depending on the mercy of God to forgive us. One of Yogananda's disciples, who constantly was going against Yogananda's advice, said, "You'll forgive me, won't you, Master?" And Master said, "What else can I do?" But if we eternally depend on God's forgiveness, but keep falling down off the path again and again, we won't get very far on the path. So I think maybe that isn't much further ahead than the scribes and the Pharisees and the priests either. So then there's another stage, hopefully we're at least at this stage, where we know to do our dharma, yato dharma tata jaya. We know we want to do the right thing. We want to increase the goodness within ourselves. And so we do the right thing. And we can say, I am doing the right thing. I'm taking care of my family. I'm doing all the things that society is telling me to do. And I am doing the right thing. I have overcome my anger. I have done the work. I've overcome my anger. I am putting out all the energy I need to overcome the obstacles that constantly come in front of me. But what do we keep hearing there? I have done this. I am being dharmic. I am putting out the energy. It's still reflecting back on us. We're thinking we are who did it. And then we're also very tempted when we think we're so good and we are attributing these virtues to ourselves to compare ourselves with others. And so what is needed to move further up that path? The virtues help us to go further up the path. But we need to go much further than that. I think of the experience that I was having when I found Ananda, or my stage of spiritual growth at that point, and I compare it to my experience now. And even though, yes, I went to Ananda, yes, I learned how to meditate, yes, I was surrounded by great souls, yes, I offered to serve and I kept serving, and I did all of those things right. And yet, when I look back at then and now, and I think, did I do that? It's like only possible by the grace of God. It's only possible by the grace of Guru that my experience has become so joyful and my life has become so full compared to what it was like back then. So even though it sort of felt like I was doing it, I realize now it's not possible that I was doing all that. It had to be Master's grace. It had to be Divine Mother's love that brought me through there. Remember when Swamiji was at the ashram with Yoganandaji, and he was putting out a lot of spiritual effort. And after months, he realized, wow, I am becoming more devotional, and I am becoming more humble. And he said he was almost becoming proud of his devotion and humility. And then he heard that Master had said to one of the other brother monks, "Look how I have changed Walter." The Guru was changing him all along. It was through the Guru's grace, God through the Guru, that changed Swamiji. It was always the Guru. It was always God. And Master used to say to Rajarsi Janakananda, "Don't forget where your power comes from, Rajarsi." And Rajarsi said, "I won't forget, Master. I know my power comes from you." So that is a great joy to know that God's grace is what is transforming us and flowing through us. And it's not by our self-effort. And then there's still one more stage further, and that is that when we can always be aware that it is God that's flowing through us, that we begin to see God everywhere, in everyone that we're with, everyone that we work with, everything that happens to us. Every one of our experiences is just God. There's the story of the sadhu who was going through a village, and little boys were picking on him, and they were throwing stones at him as he was walking through, and made him bleed, gave him some injuries. And he went back to the ashram, and his brother monks were surprised, and they were tending to him and cleaning his wounds, and said, "Who did this to you? Who did this to you?" And he said, "The same one that's caring for me now." All he saw was God and the boys, God and his brother monks. And so we can also look at this situation now, who brought this world change to us? Who is guiding our lives right now when we're at home in lockdown? It can only be God. So do we want to just be good, or do we want to be free? Every little apple seed has the potential to become a beautiful big apple tree. And the spark of the divine that lives in each one of us has the potential to become a master, to become one with cosmic consciousness. That is our glorious destiny. But when are we going to do it? How much time do you think we have? God will wait for us through eternity. Naughty or good, he will forgive us. But do we want to take eternity? Do we want it to take that long? Why not now? Especially now when we have this time. If Divine Mother has given us this time, let's use it. Let's think of, even when lockdown ends, how might we reprioritize our lives? How can I go further on that mountain and move closer to the goal? What does Lahiri Mahashaya say? He says, Banat, Banat, Banjai. Doing, one day done. So let's together feel God's power, feel God's grace flowing through our self-efforts, yes. But then receive that grace and allow them to become what they are. Allow them to expand our consciousness into theirs. God bless you.